you did mention something that I think is worth noting and that I always warn folks against when they are embarking on using any kind of neurologic stimulation, anything that like stimulates the brain. If you have really compromised health, or you do have a lot of exposure to like latent infections or mold exposure, sparking the brain can be a little bit of a challenge. And so this goes back to the gut, right? I always say, like, address the gut first and get that systemic inflammation down in the body so that we can address the brain without having, because sometimes people get a little jumpy when you start bringing, you'll get like a paradoxical reaction that you didn't expect when you sometimes bring in neuro formulas. So I love the idea of I love that the foundations of all of these are naturopathic in nature. That it makes so much sense. This is why I didn't know this about you until a few days ago. This is why, because every formula, you've sent me a few things and I'm like, this is genius. But this explains it. So truly.
I don't know about you, but my kind of order of operations for healing people is work on adrenals.
Yep.
Then gut, then liver and detoxification and elimination, then hormones, and then you can sort of do all the extras wherever else. Like if it's kidneys are still not functioning, then you can go after them. If it's neuro, brain fog, all that sort of, if that's not already resolved from working on those prior ones, then you can bring in things like neuro. And then the additional things are, I want to like slow my rate of aging. I want to use NMN. I want to boost mitochondrial function too. That kind of plays in wherever you kind of wanted to as an add-on on the side.
Because if we can get people feeling better, they start moving. My goal is always to get them interested in nutritious food, which sometimes it's hard to do. If you feel like complete garbage, you tend to eat complete garbage. Your instincts are off. Everything's dulled and your taste buds are dulled. You just feel like shit. So you eat like shit, right? And that's a tough cycle to get out of for some people. And so if we can this is where I really love the GLP-1s, because if we can give them something to get them feeling better, then they do better. If we can get people wanting to move, they start moving. When you start moving and you start focusing on that, you actually start drinking more water and you start eating better and you start going to sleep on time, because we're just fancy mammals with opposable thumbs. Like, we're supposed to have the same things that mammals have. My dogs are way better behaved when it's not pouring rain all day and we actually get outside and they get to run the fields, right? I have much better behaved dogs. Same with us, same with kids. Adults are no different. And so if we can get some of those features addressed, then they start making better choices. And as they start making better choices, I hate to use the analogy of an onion, but it starts to peel back the layers and we can start to see where we need to target. But every single individual is just that, an individual. And this is why people yell at me online and they're like, what's the dose? When they want to know the microdose of the GLP-1. And I'm like, I have no idea. The dose comes down to a lot of factors that I go into inside my course, but it really comes down with all of these things. What are our short-term goals? What is our long-term goals? What are we dealing with, right? Like, what's the playing field? And this is where peptides, I think, have a nice pleiotropic effect.
They're a fantastic circuit breaker or a spiral reverser. See, if you're stuck in a downward spiral, sometimes you just need to get pulled out. And if a GLP-1 or a BPC or whatever it is pulls you out, even if it's a pharmaceutical, I'm not opposed to them if they're going to long-term get you to your health goal. Like an SSRI, God, I definitely cannot say I'm a fan of them long-term, but short-term, they might be the exact thing you need to start doing the interventional, the lifestyle, the mental things to get yourself off of them in the future and get yourself in a better state of health. So
I completely agree. They're lifesavers in the right, done properly. I microdose those too. They're an anti-inflammatory on the brain at certain doses, from what I understand. And we're potentially sparking the HPA axis. So I just think there's a place for everything if people know what they're doing with them. It's when we start getting into peptides too. When we start getting into crazy high doses, not a fan. And long-term high dose, like of anything, I'm not a fan. So
absolutely. That's a big reason I like the oral peptides is you can sort of dose up and you don't have to, you're not going to make the mistakes that you can with reconstitution, and you don't have to worry as much about, we still have incredibly high purity. We always test on our stuff. But if you're to inject a peptide that's contaminated with LPS or heavy metals, 100% of what you inject ends up in circulation, and then your body's got to deal with that. That's why it's important to really source your injectable peptides, especially from compounding chemists. Knock on wood that Kennedy makes them all available again, if he can do that. Or if you do an oral one, then it's not good to have LPS ingested nor heavy metals, but at least the barrier of your gut is going to selectively not let 100% of it into circulation. I believe heavy metals in a normal gut, only 0.1% of things like aluminium and mercury actually end up absorbed, which, over time can definitely accumulate and become a problem. But if you're taking a capsule, for example, you're not going to end up with 100 micrograms of aluminium or mercury in your body. If you did it orally versus injectable, you will. And there's so many people who detox heavy metals and yet will take peptides that are cheap and nasty and end up putting them back in, potentially, if they're getting them from really unreputable sources, of which, unfortunately, because of what you mentioned with the FDA, there's been plenty of them spawn up in the last sort of two years or so.
It's true. The whole industry's kind of gone rogue. And so when I find a good company that makes good orals, that I think it's a no-brainer, right? We know it's clean and they work. So